Hey everyone, this is Renee Frey from TalentQ, and you're listening to the Conscious Professional Podcast. More people than ever want to be happy in their career and personal life, but they're going about it all wrong. I'm here to set the record straight and emphasize the importance of prioritizing your mindset. I'm thrilled you're here. Last week on the podcast, I talked about having a midlife crisis. And thank God we don't all have them. I'm grateful to have had gone through mine, but it was excruciating, and holy hell did I learn so much, and it totally propelled me in a direction to truly be living my life for me. If you didn't listen to that episode, I encourage you to go back and check it out. The topic that we're diving into this week is kind of an extension of that, or could be seen as something that may make someone have a midlife crisis. This week, I'm talking about comparison. You know me, I'm a big word and language person. I feel that the words we think and speak really do matter. So I brought the Webster definition of the word comparison. The definition is, it is an examination of two or more items to establish similarities and dissimilarities. Comparison isn't necessarily bad if you're talking about books or organisms in science class, but when we start comparing ourselves to one another, it's kind of like a no-win situation, being caught between a rock and a hard place. No matter how you compare, there is no path to a positive outcome. And when you compare yourself to someone else, it creates, in my mind, an icky belief either way. If you compare yourself and you think you're somehow better than someone else, that's gross. And I genuinely believe we are all equal. So putting yourself above others just doesn't sit right with me. And on the flip side, if you compare yourself and feel like you're beneath someone, that's equally uncomfortable. My core belief is we are all equal. So there is no need to compare ourselves to another person at all. You are the only unique you on this planet. Now, this is way easier said than done because we all have egos. However, we can tame those egos to calm down and eliminate the comparison notions. When you get into comparison mode, you're not going to lead the most fulfilling life possible because comparison is an awful place to be in. It's totally driven by the ego, and you want to make sure you reframe it differently because it's also tied to scarcity. When you have a scarcity mindset or believe there's not enough for you, or you're comparing yourself to someone else, that can put you in the danger zone. Because let me tell you, there is more than enough abundance for every single one of us on this earth. There is always going to be more than enough for all of us. When you think about it, truly think about how much abundance surrounds us every single day in our environment. Think of all the leaves on the trees. If you tried to count all the leaves on all the trees in the world, would you ever finish counting? Could you even fathom counting all the leaves on all the trees that exist on this planet? Insane, right? What about the drops of water in the ocean and the rivers and the lakes? Just think about that for a minute. There is pure abundance in nature that surrounds us every single day. Think of all the birds in the trees and the animals in the forests and all the fish in the water. Let's go further. Think of all the invisible particles of oxygen that we breathe in every single second of the day. The particles of oxygen that are invisible to us that keep us alive. That is pure abundance too. And we don't even need to ask for the oxygen. It's just all there for the taking, all of this abundance of oxygen. Simply magnificent, huh? Hopefully, by me sharing some of these beliefs that I have about abundance and that we can see it in our world all around us, hopefully it'll help you change your perspective. And now, if you ever think there's not enough, just look outside in nature and you will see the beauty and the magnificent of pure abundance that surrounds you, that you can see, and even the oxygen you can't see. Even the invisible energy we breathe in is oxygen that you can't see. Everywhere around every single one of us is total abundance. It's magnificent the amount of abundance we see in nature and that we are surrounded by all of this abundance. And the universe, God, divine mind, whatever you want to call it, wants you to have all of this abundance for yourself, to experience it because you are worthy of it, because you're alive on this planet. So stepping away from abundance for a second and back into comparison, I'm going to try to dig in deep and really show you what your life can look like without it. This will totally transform your life. We are taught comparison at a very young age. Think of the grades you try to achieve at school. Do you remember when you take a test and your teacher's handing back out your test, and after grading it, you'd ask the kid next to you, hey, what'd you get? What'd you get on the test? Yep, I did that. I remember that. What about sports? That's the definition of comparison or competition. And although sports are pretty amazing with learning how to take direction and having expectations, learning about responsibility, sportsmanship, teamwork, what we truly learn from sports is truly amazing aside from the competition and comparison aspect of them, right? What about the keeping up with the Joneses mentality? You see your neighbor show up parking in their driveway with a shiny black BMW sedan, and you might not even think about it consciously, but now that black BMW, that shiny black BMW you see every day as you roll into your neighborhood, and your mind subconsciously sees it every single day. In my hood, tons of people drive Audis, me included. Is it ironic? Or is there something there? And you may not even think you're keeping up with the Joneses type, but subconsciously you might be. So for those of you who are conscious about the fact you want to keep up with the Joneses and you want to one-up your neighbor, you might see your neighbor's new car and all of a sudden that sparks a desire inside of you to want to get a fancy new shiny car to outshine your neighbor. What is that really doing for you though? Let's be real. Most people could care less what kind of car you drive. If it makes you feel good that you outshine your neighbor, so be it. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. Or is it something that you've been wanting for a long time? Or maybe it's just coincidence that your neighbor bought one and you're about to buy one. I know several times when I got a new car and shortly after, I had friends who bought a very similar car to mine, just different color. It felt like buying a car was kind of contagious to me, right? This comparison is contagious. So you want to make sure that the choices you are making, you are doing them in alignment with what you desire. You're not buying the fancy car because of comparison. You're buying it because you truly want it. Because when those payments come up for your shiny new car and your insurance increases, you're now stacked with more debt if you didn't pay cash for the car, and that might add to unwanted stress in your life. We will compare. We will compare because we have egos. We're human beings. But what if for a second we can reframe it in our minds? Think of envy thinking, I want a shiny new car. I got to get what he has. What if we reframed it to, oh my gosh, I'm so excited for my neighbor who just got a black BMW. Oh my God, I'm so happy for them. I can't wait to go for a ride in it. And release any feeling of envy behind. Because when we focus on the things we don't have, you know what happens? What you focus on grows. You then get more of the same shit you don't want. And we want to train our brains to focus on everything that we do want in our lives. All of the things that you desire in your life, that's what we need to be focused on. You want to get rid of the lack that you think about. You don't want to think about the lack, because the more you think about what you don't have, the more of what you don't have is what you're going to get. If you're thinking every day, I'm in so much debt, I'm in so much debt, you're going to get into even more debt. If you reframe your thoughts to, I pay my bills on time and there's always enough money, it'll change your world. For me, learning about comparison didn't happen until I hired a coach and worked with a coach. This is when I really started diving deep into personal development and changing my mindset and changing my beliefs and attitudes. At the time, my coach recommended a book to me. It is one of my favorite books of all time. Now, I've got quite a list of favorite books because I'm a total book junkie. But this book literally changed my life. This book is called The Science of Getting Rich. And The Science of Getting Rich is written by Wallace Wattles. It was written in 1910. So it was written way before any of the Napoleon Hill's books. And I got to tell you, I firmly believe Wallace Wattles was ahead of his time, or that Napoleon Hill got inspiration for his book, Think and Grow Rich, from Wallace Wattles, The Science of Getting Rich. The Science of Getting Rich is a super short read. My copy is 93 pages. You can read it in a day. You can read it in an hour, hour and a half, depending on your reading speed. And I read this book at least once a month. Every single month, I read this book. I do this because I always want the principles in it on the top of my mind. It's a super quick refresher every time I read it. And to be honest, I see something new. I discover something new in the book every time I read it, which is so cool. And this book is like my Bible, because in it is how I learned to manifest everything in my life. Well, everything in my life from my 30s and forward. And I'm not kidding. My Tesla, my Audi SQ8, my living room furniture. This book was the key to everything and goes through everything you need to know. How the universe works, how to get what you want, but it's all totally cut to the chase. It's void of any fluffy stories. And don't get me wrong, I love Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich. I love that book too. But Wallace Wattles takes out all of those stories, the stories about the Rockefellers and the gold miners and stuff, and it just cuts to the chase, which is what I like. Because when I was looking for something to totally transform my life, to get me to the next level so I could create more expansion, grow more wealth, become happier, more joyful, and live a magnificent life filled with peace, this book was my ticket because I studied it month after month after month. I mean, I started reading it in my 30s every single month because one of my coaches told me about the book, and he said he read it once a month. So what did I do? I just decided to do what he does because he was super successful. And this stuff is magnificent because it trains you how to think and how to think about what you want and visualize all these things that you want. And then it comes into your physical reality. And when it shows up, You are going to be blown away. And everything I've ever desired has shown up in my life because I know how to manifest it. And this shit is just incredible. And I'm not talking about just physical things like my cars and my furniture. I'm talking about health, joy, happiness, wonderful relationships. You can use his techniques and manifest anything you want in your life. You just got to follow the steps and do it over and over and over again. I could go into a whole episode on creation and manifesting things, but in this episode, we're going to pull out the portion of the book where Wallace Wattles talks about comparison. And I'm going to read some key lines from his book because this book was the book that changed my perspective on comparison and competition. Now, I've been up against some serious competition in my life. When I worked at Target Corporation for 7 years, and in my career, I think I was on day 2 on the job, I shortly realized I was sitting, working amongst a sea of competition. They were all sitting all around me, little sharks in all these different cubicles. And I'm super competitive. I am so fucking driven. I'm always out to win. If I ever play a game, my goal is to win. I always want to win. To my core, this is how I'm built. I love to succeed. I love to win. And in the past, I loved to crush my competition. When I got into recruiting, they would show our rankings on the board in the bullpen area where we all worked. It's basically a huge room with low cubicles, and they would show our stats of our sales numbers on that big whiteboard. And I always wanted to be number 1. That was my goal. That's just part of who I am and how I'm wired. I love to succeed. I love to outshine others. Now, I got to tell you, honestly, I have changed so much from that cutthroat, competitive, win it at all costs lady that I used to be. And I'll never forget the day when my husband and I were playing a game with my 2 little kids, and they were like toddlers at the time. I don't even know if they were in school yet. They were teeny tiny. And I was so excited to be winning, and I was crushing my kids, beating them at this game. And my husband looked at me and he grabbed my arm and he whispered, "Renee, they're your kids." And he gave me these huge eyes like, "Knock it off." And I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? Why am I being mean to my kids, wanting to crush them to win? What the hell? That's not nice. So I learned how to shift my beliefs, and I had to reframe my mindset. This game with my kids was way before I learned about competition. Now I want to grab the book so I can share Wallace Wattles' philosophy on competition. So I'm just showing the book to you, and I've pulled all the snippets out that I want to read. And I also want to share how you can read this book for free online. Did you know there's a free online resource where you can read any book that was written before 1923? These books are in the public domain because they're not protected under U.S. copyright law. This includes all works published before 1923. So anything published before 1923 here in the United States is automatically in the public domain. You can take it, use it for whatever you want. Where you can find these free books is on a website called Project Gutenberg, which I've linked in the description of the episode. I've also put the actual link to the book Science of Getting Rich that's on that site into the description as well. Super cool, huh? So go check it out. Okay, so in chapter 5, the title is Increasing Life. On page 25 of my book, he says, you must get rid of the thought of competition. You are to create, not to compete for what is already created. You do not have to take anything away from anyone. You do not have to drive sharp bargains. You do not have to cheat or take advantage. You do not need to let any man work for you for less than he earns. You do not have to covet the property of others or to look at it with wishful eyes. No man has anything of which you cannot have the like, and that without taking what he has away from him. You are to become a creator, not a competitor. You are going to get what you want, but in such a way that when you get it, every other man will have more than he has now. That's one of my most favorite lines. I'm going to repeat it. You are to become a creator, not a competitor. You are going to get what you want, but in such a way that when you get it, every other man will have more than he has now. Yes! Isn't that the best? He goes on to say, but remember that your thought must be held upon the creative plane. You are never for an instant to be betrayed into regarding the supply as limited or into acting on the moral level of competition. So what he's saying is if you have a scarcity mindset, you got to get rid of that and reframe it to an abundance mindset. If you need more guidance on that, then please go back to the episode titled Explore an Abundance Mindset, how it can help you take risks and find your confidence. In another chapter, number 9, titled How to Use the Will, he says, people must be taught to become rich by creation, not by competition. Every man who becomes rich by competition throws down behind him the ladder by which he rises and keeps others down. But every man who gets rich by creation opens a way for thousands to follow him and inspires them to do so. So true, isn't it? I'm all about reaching down the ladder and helping pull people up with me, not smashing the lid down on their heads. In chapter 10, in the title Further Use, he touches on competition again. Moral and spiritual greatness is possible only to those who are above the competitive battle for existence, and only those who are becoming rich on the plane of creative thought are free from the degrading influences of competition. If your heart is set on domestic happiness, remember that love flourishes best where there is refinement, a high level of thought, and freedom from corrupting influences. And these are to be found only where riches are attained by the exercise of creative thought without strife or rivalry. He says in chapter 16, titled Some Cautions and Concluding Observations, he says, but remember that your thought must be held upon the creative plane. You are never for an instant to be betrayed into regarding the supply as limited or into acting on the moral level of competition. How Waddles shares this in his book made total and complete sense to me, and I began removing the thoughts and beliefs I had about competition out of my mind. Comparison and competition are a never-ending trap. With the evolution of social media, we are exposed to other people's successes more than ever. But how do we know what they're throwing online is real? We truly don't know, and we don't know what's going on behind the scenes unless we have a relationship with those people. Now that you've heard some new philosophies on competition, let's dig into the impact it may have on your professional life. So in your work, if you're comparing yourself to others, it could lead to imposter syndrome, decreased productivity, and the temptation to pursue goals that aren't aligned with your personal values. I was doing this. I was living my life for someone else, going after goals that were all to make the most money possible out of all my siblings to try to get the attention of my dad. I was making over $250,000 annually in my late 20s, which I thought would totally get him to pay attention to me. And guess what? In the end, he still never gave me any damn attention, which led to my midlife crisis. When I realized this shit, then all the fucking wheels fell off the bus of my life. Don't let this happen to you. I work with professionals every single day, and one of the greatest values I can help them with is figuring out what they want out of their career and what they want for their future career growth. Figuring out what they truly desire, not what their colleague is up to, not what their neighbor is doing, helping them figure it out for themselves. This is where true career fulfillment comes into play. When you align your goals with your values, not from outdoing others, you can start doing some reflection for yourself. Find a quiet spot, grab a journal and a pen, and just allow yourself to be in silence with yourself. This is not scary at all. Then start by writing down a question and allow yourself to answer the question you wrote without any limitations. Leave any thought or limit or scarcity behind. Leave them behind. Allow yourself to write freely and dream. You may be so surprised at what you come up with. A really great question to start with is, what do I really, really want? I know you got this and can do it. The last thing I want to leave you with, if I asked you to write down everything you desire in your life, what would you write down? Think about it for just a minute. I do this with my clients all the time too. You know what they write down? I'm sure it's the exact same thing that you wrote down. They all write down stuff they don't currently have in their life. At one time, you wanted everything you have, which is why you now have it in your life. But when we think about what we want, why don't we desire what we already have and be so damn grateful for it? I'm not saying you can't want more. I'm the last fucking person to tell you that you can't have more. You know me. The more, the better, the bigger, the better. I think you can have more and more and more, as much as you want. Go for it. But if you manifested all that in your life that's already there, that's something to celebrate and be insanely grateful for. Just some food for thought. So as you go about your day, take a moment to acknowledge what you already have achieved. It's easy to get caught up in chasing the next thing, but don't forget to appreciate and pause and appreciate the amazing things you've already brought into your life. Gratitude fuels growth. And when you're thankful for what you have, it opens up even more space for the things you desire. Remember, you're capable of creating and receiving whatever you want. And celebrating the journey is just as important as reaching the destination. So the key points from today's episode are: comparison is a no-win situation that only leads to negative outcomes. Recognize that the world is filled with abundance and there will always be enough to go around. Focus on creation, not competition. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Share this episode with someone you love and go make one change to be better than you were yesterday. Live your life with intention. I believe in you. I'm on a mission to help as many people as possible. So if you would, please hit the follow button so we can grow our community of conscious professionals. Whether you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can find the button at the top of the page. See you next week. Cheers, everyone.